Of course. Here's section 1 of the story, a direct, high-quality narrative totaling 760-plus words, with no fluff or repeated ideas. This section focuses on emotional setup and foreshadowing as per the outline. The coffee machine gurgled again. She'd meant to replace it last month, but like most things lately, it stayed just long enough to be tolerated. Across the table, Ethan scrolled through his phone. His cereal had gone soggy. She didn't mention it. They hadn't talked much lately, except for the functional things. What time are you coming home? Did you pay the gas bill? I think we're out of detergent. Maya stared at her mug, fingers curled around the heat. He didn't notice. She couldn't remember the last time he looked her in the eye during breakfast. Maybe people changed slowly. Maybe it wasn't one moment that caused the distance, but a series of small exits, a missed call here, a distracted smile there. He laughed suddenly. Quiet, under his breath. She looked up. He tilted the screen away, still smiling. What's funny? She asked, voice flat. Just something from work, he replied too quickly. Nothing really. She nodded. Noted the way his ears turned a little red. Ethan didn't lie well, but lately, he'd gotten better at avoidance. They used to joke that she could read his mind. Now, she wasn't sure she wanted to know what was in it. Nights were colder. Not the air, but the space between them in bed. His back faced her more often than not. The weight of his presence didn't feel like comfort anymore, it felt like obligation. He'd kiss her goodnight sometimes, out of habit. But even that had become brief, careful. Like touching something fragile and not wanting to break it, or be blamed if it did. The whisper happened on a Thursday. She'd forgotten her book downstairs and came back quietly, not expecting to hear anything. Ethan was in the home office, door half closed. His voice was low, warm in a way she hadn't heard in months. Take it easy, baby. The words slid out like velvet. Soft, deliberate. She didn't move. Didn't blink. Then a gentle laugh, female, muffled, on speaker maybe. A name she didn't recognize. He said something else, but it blurred. Her ears were ringing. She backed up slowly, toes curling against the hardwood floor. In the bedroom, the silence was different. It wasn't peace. It was the sound of something breaking in a room with no windows. Ethan came to bed an hour later. Kissed her on the shoulder like nothing happened. She pretended to sleep. In the morning, she brewed the coffee first, careful not to make noise. He walked in rubbing his eyes, asked if she'd seen his blue tie. She pointed to the chair. Didn't look up. He thanked her, still half asleep, and left with a kiss to her here. She wanted to ask. She didn't. The words tasted like betrayal even in her mouth. Not his betrayal, hers, for staying silent. That day, she moved slower. Not out of tiredness, but caution. As if any sudden movement might shatter the false calm between them. She kept busy, reorganizing drawers that didn't need it, wiping down already clean surfaces. She played the whisper in her head on loop. The softness. The word baby. He hadn't called her that in 2 years, maybe 3. He used to. In texts, in the middle of crowded parties, when she was anxious and needed grounding. That name had been hers. Once, she checked his texts. Nothing. Not even a thread that looked suspicious. Either he was careful, or it hadn't been through the phone. Maybe video calls. Maybe it wasn't frequent enough to leave a trace. By evening, she felt detached from her own skin. Like watching a show she knew the ending to. She smiled when he joked. Laughed politely. Kissed him back when he leaned in. Later, while brushing her teeth, she whispered it to herself. Take it easy, baby. The mirror didn't flinch. Her reflection looked like someone else. When Ethan came out of the shower, he smiled, asked if she wanted to watch something. She said no, maybe tomorrow. He didn't push. He rarely did anymore. He turned off the lights and got into bed. The sheets rustled. She turned away, her eyes stayed open long after his breathing slowed. The room felt smaller. The air tighter. Like the walls knew something too. In the dark, she whispered one more time. Who were you talking to? But only the silence answered. Of course. Here is section 2, continuing directly from the previous part with a sharp, emotionally honest, and concise narrative. Word count is at least 760, and there is no repetition or fluff. He didn't know she was watching. She had followed him 3 blocks from his office, staying close enough to see but far enough to be no one. When he stopped in front of a wine bar they'd never been to, she already knew what she'd find. Still, when Layla leaned in and touched his arm, when Ethan smiled with that softness she used to know, something inside her finally snapped, but quietly she didn't cry. She took the photo. Not for revenge, not for proof. For clarity. That night, the printed photo sat on the kitchen table, next to a glass of water and the same dry silence. He saw it, stopped, stared. His keys made a small metallic sound as they hit the counter. She didn't say anything. He opened his mouth twice before walking away. The space between them in the house grew sharper. Words were fewer. Movements, calculated. She noticed everything. How he texted less at dinner, but smiled at nothing. How he checked the front door before bed, not for safety but habit. How his phone stayed on silent, screen always face down. She didn't ask questions. She watched. Watched him pace in the office, watched his fingers hover over the keyboard too long, watched his guilt ooze into his posture. Every gesture became a confession. Maya began waking up earlier. Sitting in the living room before sunrise, just to listen to the quiet. Her thoughts no longer spiraled, they settled like dust, covering everything evenly. He still kissed her goodbye, but her skin no longer registered the contact. She remembered the first year of their marriage, Sunday pancakes, long drives without destinations, how he once stood in line at midnight just to buy her a first edition book she'd mentioned once. Now, she was lucky to get a reply that wasn't clipped or half-hearted. Somewhere between then and now, she'd become background noise. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was how easy it had become for him. How casual. How ordinary. As if emotional fidelity was a luxury neither of them could afford anymore. One evening, he reached for her hand during a movie. She let him. His thumb brushed hers. For a moment, she imagined saying something sharp, something final. But instead, she asked, "Do you love her?" He froze. Not because of the question, but because of how quietly it came. "No," he said too fast. "It's not like that." "What is it like?" He paused. It was just a connection. Nothing serious." She nodded. "Like ours used to be." The room fell back into silence. Not the heavy kind, just empty. Later that night, she stood at the sink washing a single glass. Her hands moved in slow circles. Behind her, he hovered like a ghost. "I didn't mean for it to happen." She didn't turn around. Most people don't. He left the room. She heard the creak of their bedroom door, the same sound it had made the night she first moved in with him. It used to mean comfort. Now, it meant absence. The next morning, she took a long look in the mirror. Not to fix anything, just to remember who she was before all of this. Her eyes weren't sad anymore. Just tired of pretending not to know. She passed him in the hallway. He looked at her, as if searching for a way back. She didn't stop. She found herself journaling again. It wasn't therapeutic. It was documentation. She wrote down the time, the date, the things he said. She wrote what he didn't say. She wrote how long it had been since they'd laughed at the same joke. He asked her one night if they could talk. She said, "About what?" He didn't answer. She slept with her back to him. He didn't try to cross the space between them anymore. Maybe he thought it would be too much effort. Maybe he finally understood it was too late. She no longer cared about the why. Why he drifted, why he chose someone else, why the man she married could whisper softness to a stranger while she folded his laundry upstairs. The why didn't change the weight of what was done. What mattered was what came next, and she knew. Nothing he said now would ever matter more than the moment he said her name to someone else and meant it with tenderness. The heart doesn't break all at once. It unthreads. Quietly, like a secret unraveling in the dark. She was already gone. He just hadn't realized it yet. Of course. Here is section 3, continuing directly with the same tone, emotional precision, and no repetition or fluff. The word count is kept above 760 as requested. He waited in the kitchen with both hands wrapped around a cup he didn't drink from. She walked in without looking at him. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been proven. He opened his mouth. She didn't stop moving. Only when she reached for her bag did he try again. It wasn't serious. he said. She paused, adjusting the strap on her shoulder. You said that already. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't think about me at all. I did, he insisted, his voice cracking. Things felt different between us. You barely looked at me anymore. She turned slowly. And she did? Silence. Did you call her baby, too? He blinked. What? You said it. That night. Softly. Like it meant something. Like you cared. He lowered his eyes. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything. I just wanted to know if it was ever really mine. She left before he could respond. Not out of rage, but clarity. There was no scream, no fight, no dramatic slam of the door. Only the sound of footsteps on tile, a door closing gently behind her, and the quiet he would carry long after she walked without destination. Through streets lined with ordinary things, parked cars, the smell of bread from a nearby cafe, a child laughing in the distance. Life was still happening, even as something inside her was folding itself away for good. When she returned, the house was empty. His suitcase was gone. A note waited on the table. She didn't read it. She placed it in the drawer with expired coupons and batteries that didn't work. Days passed. She rearranged the living room. Moved the couch to a different angle. Threw out a box of old wires and cards from anniversaries that no longer meant anything. Nothing symbolic. Just space. Breathing room. She stopped setting the table for two. Meals were simpler. Quieter. She left the bedroom window open. The air felt cleaner now. Sometimes she caught herself waiting for the sound of his car. When it didn't come, she felt something close to relief. She didn't tell anyone. Not right away. There was nothing noble in announcing what had been hollow for months. She kept the details to herself, not out of shame, but protection. People always wanted to know why, as if the answer made the wound easier to carry. The truth was simple: she wasn't chosen. Not when it mattered. He texted once. Just one line, I'm sorry for all of it. She stared at it. Not because of what it said, but because of how small it looked. She didn't reply. She sat in a coffee shop 3 weeks later, journal open in front of her. First page, the whisper was never mine. Below it, she wrote, but I heard it anyway. Loud enough to wake everything I'd been ignoring. The pain didn't leave. It just got quieter. Less violent. More like background static than thunder. She didn't miss him. She missed who she thought he was. Who she had been with him, before the edges dulled and names lost meaning. A letter arrived. His handwriting on the envelope. She held it for a while, then slipped it beneath a stack of unread magazines. If it was redemption, it had come too late. If it was regret, she already carried enough for both of them. She began smiling again. Small things. A joke on the radio. A stranger holding the door open. The quiet joy of coming home to a space that no longer asked her to shrink. She donated his jackets. Sold the guitar he never played. Threw away the candle they lit on every anniversary. It had burned to the bottom long ago. She wasn't bitter. Just done. Weeks turned into months. One morning, she walked past a bookstore and stopped. Inside, a table with new releases. A title caught her eye, Starting Over, One Whisper at a Time. She picked it up, traced the letters on the cover. The irony didn't sting, it grounded her. At the counter, the cashier smiled. Good choice, they said. She nodded. Later, at home, she placed the book on her nightstand, made tea, opened a window. The breeze felt like something beginning. She whispered it once, softer than before, take it easy, baby. This time, it was hers. Of course. Here is section 4 of the story, continuing with the same sharp, emotionally grounded tone. It avoids repetition, remains to the point, and maintains narrative continuity. The word count exceeds 760 as requested. A message arrived 2 months later. Not from him. From Layla. The name appeared on her screen like a foreign word, familiar yet meaningless. One line, I thought you should hear it from me. Maya read it once, then again, trying to decide if she felt anything at all. She replied, you already told me everything I needed to know. Just not directly. There was no response. It wasn't anger that lingered anymore. It was the odd, settled calm of no longer wondering. No more late night what ifs. No running through conversations in her head. She didn't need to replay what she already understood. People don't trip into infidelity, they walk toward it with small, consistent steps. She hadn't spoken his name out loud in weeks. It had lost its place in her vocabulary. Some part of her still catalogued memories, anniversary dinners, shared playlists, the smell of his cologne, but they surfaced without emotion now. Like watching scenes from a film she didn't choose, she started writing again, this time for herself. Not to process pain, but to reclaim space. She wrote about silence. About how it can rot a connection from the inside. About how betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers through routines, through turned backs, through the absence of questions. Her journal filled with single-line entries. Trust ends quietly. He looked me in the eye and still chose her. I wasn't angry. I was eroded. They were fragments, but together they formed a map of her survival. She began noticing things she'd overlooked for years. The comfort of being alone without being lonely. The joy in finishing a thought without interruption. The clarity that comes when no one else's voice is louder than your own in your head. He called once. She let it ring. Voicemail followed. I know I don't deserve your time, but I miss you. She deleted it. If he missed her, it was only after losing everything he didn't protect. Forgiveness wasn't the goal. Distance was. She no longer needed closure. Not when the facts were simple. He left emotionally before he ever touched someone else. She had stayed out of hope. Hope had expired. She watched couples sometimes. In restaurants. On benches. Wondered how many were pretending, how many were holding hands while carrying unspoken doubts. Not in bitterness, just curiosity. She had once been them. Smiling while something frayed inside. One morning, she revisited the drawer where the letter still sat, unopened. She took it out, held it, then tore it in half without reading. Not out of hate. Out of clarity. Whatever it said, it was meant for someone who still waited for words to mean something. She had moved past that. She started traveling. Short trips. Places they never went together. Places untainted by memory. She took photos, not for sharing but for keeping. Not proof of healing, just evidence of movement. A friend asked if she was dating again. She smiled. Eventually, she said. But she didn't say when. There was no timeline for rebuilding. She liked the quiet too much to trade it carelessly. In a bookstore again, she picked up a novel and flipped to the back. A quote caught her eye. You only notice the cage once you taste air. She bought it without hesitation. She no longer saw herself as broken. Not healing either. Just whole in a different shape. One afternoon, she passed the wine bar. The one he had taken Layla to. It was empty, chairs stacked, sign flipped to closed. She didn't slow down. Life was not what it was before him. It was sharper now. More defined. Her loneliness wasn't desperation. It was space. She could finally hear herself. At home, she lit a candle. Not for ambience. For ritual. A soft reset. One flame, one room, no ghosts. She whispered it again, for the last time, not out of memory, but ownership. Take it easy, baby. Not a plea. Not a wound. A vow to herself.